call to order. Please rise with me and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May be seated. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Dan Dragonetti,
Present.
Mike Barron,
Here.
Dick Kroll,
Here.
Matthew Sims has asked for an excused absence. Beth Mitchell. Here. Louise Cottenberg. Here. Carolyn Sartain Anderson.
Here.
Michael Frank has asked for an excused absence. Sergio Mota.
Here.
Albert Iovino. Not present. Bruce Hoffman
Here.
and Chairman Fred Jones.
Here.
Thank you.
Do we have any agenda modifications? Seeing none, having none, we'll move forward with the approval of the minutes. August 10th, 2011 minutes. Is that? It's a long way away.
I move to approve.
Second.
It's been motioned and second. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Like sign. Now we'll move forward with the January 19th, 2016 minutes.
I move.
Move. We have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, signify aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Like sign. Motion carries. Minutes approved. Unfinished business of the 2011 Charter Review ballot questions. That's on pages 9 through 14 of your packet.
I have a question.
Yes.
We have the ordinances, and then we have the actual ballots. And on the ordinances, there's one that was noted as being defeated. Does that mean all the rest of them were passed? So some say passed as amended, some did not say anything. No, I wasn't here at that time, so I'm...
Yeah, neither was I, and those are questions that I have. For example, ordinance number 0-11-10 passed as amended. It's about the ordinance of the city, Any River County, Florida, scheduling an election to be held on Tuesday, November the 8th for the purpose of submitting to the electors, the city of Sebastian, the question of whether to amend section 2.03, section 2.04, and section 4.12A of the city charter by conducting the elections in even-numbered years and provide 4-year terms for city council members, providing ballot language and effective date. And yes, and there's are some, I guess these were put on a ballot. Is that your question too?
Well, the charter amendments were on the ballot, but before that, there was ordinances listed.
Yeah.
And I was confused as to what the difference was between the ordinances and the charter amendments that were actually put on the ballot and so on and so forth.
I shared your confusion, but my interpretation was that these were recommendations that went to city council, but not necessarily made it to the ballot. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
Can everybody move their mic closer to them? Thank you.
So I guess my next question would be then, are the ones that were not passed, the question number one on conduct elections in even number of years and the removal of charter officers, is there any reason for this group to recommend the same thing again, or would it be defeated in the same way? I mean, is that something we should consider?
I would like to reconsider.
I would too.
items that perhaps didn't make it through the last time.
Okay.
I concur. Yeah,
I think too, times change, and that's why we're here.
right.
Right.
Correct.
It seems to me that to not have elections in the normal election years would save a lot of, I mean, that would save a lot of money if we did it that way, and I don't know why it was defeated. I'm surprised.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't sold to the public that way. I'm not sure because, and when we have an off-year election, it costs the city at least 30 to 35,000. If I'm not wrong, I don't know what the actual numbers are to have an off-year election from the state or anybody else. So we're the only ones that haven't any election. Is that everybody else's?
Good number.
Mr. Chairman, there is a point I'd like to bring up. Been brought to my attention that there is pending legislation concerning this issue. That the Florida legislature has pending legislation has gone through the House. It's not been taken up by the Senate yet, specifying exactly when municipal elections can take place.
Mm.
We don't have any further intelligence as to what the Senate plans on doing with it, or how the governor is disposed regarding this. So this might all be a moot point.
On the other hand, I really think that we ought to have this conversation about that particular subject and position ourselves regardless of what happens in Tallahassee. If it turns out that Tallahassee makes a decision, that's cool, but in the event that they don't, I'd still like to address the issue.
Yes, I agree with that as well.
I guess the same question remains on the removal of charter officers. That was defeated for some reason too. I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but the previous group thought it was a good idea. Some of you were on that previous group.
You know, the one comment that I would make about the amendments that either failed or passed, I have a very paltry amount of people voting on these amendments. This was in 2011, and probably voter turnout, I don't know what it was, but you know, when you're talking 2,500 people in a population of a city of 25,000, that just doesn't seem like these amendments that were in front of them had enough consideration. I would hope that in 2016, with the presidential election, the turnout might be a little bit better. We might have a better way to gauge how this is.
I'm not too sure that has anything to do with whether people understand or even care. Sometimes it's been my experience over the years that, and I know you've probably witnessed it too, sometimes you get more votes that are completely uninformed or do not understand the issue, and I don't think it's necessarily a better gauge as to people understanding. And I think some of these things, I was shocked to see that it's like, how could you miss this?
Well, you know, I do have a question, Louise. Maybe you could help here, and that's, it's somewhat procedural, but as a committee, we make recommendations to the council, and then council either moves forward with those recommendations or not. But let's assume for a moment something comes out of this committee and the council agrees to it, and it gets put on the ballot. Is there a method to communicate the thinking of the committee, the reasons why these issues were brought forward to begin with? Or is there any prohibition in speaking out about why an issue might be on a ballot from a committee member point of view?
There is no prohibition, and I think it was an unusual choice of words that it was like not sold to the public. It wasn't sold to the public. Amendments to the Constitution show up on the ballot. There is a specific, if I'm not mistaken, a specific limited latitude in how they can be written, which sometimes causes them to be less understandable for people who are not familiar with the process or the language. And I think that that contributes to a misunderstanding, but there is no prohibition to any one of us going out to let the public know this is what we recommended and this is why we recommended it. There is a presentation to the council, but as you know, sometimes only a few people pay attention to that.
And probably the only exposure that many people get is if they're listed in a newspaper, if somebody reads a newspaper.
If they, and more people don't,
Right.
but many people see it for the first time, and when they go to the polls, and I think probably because I've had some experience with these sorts of things with getting people, and I know that you know it too, people read at 55 miles an hour, and they usually quit after the second sentence if something doesn't really grab them. And
It's also-
this stuff is not real exciting.
Yeah. It's also the reason why the votes vary so much. The total number of votes varies so much because some people just didn't understand it, so they didn't vote on it.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. And I think it's human nature. We can work hard to educate the public, but we don't have a budget for that. In fact, we don't have a budget at all.
Maybe it's the sheer number of charter amendments that are put out at one time for voting, and people reading 6 or 7 of them and going, I don't understand this. Maybe if we reduce some and maybe only have 3 or 4 on the ballot or something. That's just a thought, because I've heard other people say there's too many of those things on there, and you just whatever you just vote for. I don't understand them, so I just check whatever. I'm like, that's not what you're supposed to do. If you don't understand it, at least ask someone about it. So, but that's what people do. So,
I think that the last time around was, I believe, the 3rd time that I was on a charter committee. And the amendments that were brought forward that time were much more successful than any of them in the previous times. And I don't know, I can't even tell you why that would have been, because many of them were reruns. But maybe it has to do with the times change and people begin to think differently about things, so.
I know we have the city manager sitting in the back here.
good.
My question would be, are the amendments posted online, on-site? Is there anything from the city's perspective in terms of getting this out before people see a ballot? No?
There'll be some newspaper advertisements.
Are those advertisements sponsored by the city or just the papers themselves?
The city will pay for newspaper advertisements. It's just a little box with the ordinance titles that you guys are looking at.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
they-
Mr. Griffin, when's the next, what's that called? Sebastian Pelican, whatever your new city newsletter is? And by that time, this committee should be done, correct?
Yeah.
If the council voted by then?
I don't know, will council vote by then? Who's in control of that idea? We could put them, since that newsletter is now being shipped to every home, correct?
There it is.
It should help to put that information out there.
Good idea.
I think that it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I know that all my neighbors have already read the latest newsletter.
Particularly if it were stated in a more user-friendly language, as opposed to merely state, but the ad that goes in the newspaper merely states what will be on the ballot, exactly the way it will be on the ballot, has to be that way. But again, that's one of those issues of the thought process of why we recommend these things is probably more important than the things themselves. And that rarely gets out to more than about 24 people.
Right.
Like we can't say in the first one, we can't say it saves money. We can't say that probably, so. Unfortunately, because that's,
No, you can't
people
say
would
that.
vote for that if you could say that, so. Okay.
So now, I think we jumped right into some things that we were actually going to be covering, so. Sure. Okay, now we're at the public input section. Anyone from the public? Be recognized, sir. State your name, your address.
Hi, I'm Bob Zomack, 685 Collier Lake Circle, Sebastian, Florida. Oh, hi. Is it on? Yep. Okay, fine. You here?
Thank you, Bob.
What you're supposed to do. Can you hear me? Yeah. I served on the last Charter Review Committee. I was vice chair to Louise. Carolyn was there too, and Dan. Okay. At the end of that, and Ms. Mitchell, I prepared a little white paper on process improvement, and I think it goes to some of the things that you are talking about. Okay? And it really was. These were suggestions for process improvement, having gone through and been somewhat frustrated by the way the thing unfolded. And what I observed was an overview presentation of each section the committee recommended for change, a debate by council on the merits.
Can you hold the mic up
Oh,
to your
okay.
mouth? The acoustics in this place are notoriously awful.
Yeah, okay.
That's good.
Better. I got to get right up close and personal, huh? What I observed was an overview presentation of each section the committee recommended for change, a debate by council on the merits of the changes as presented, and an initial decision on what elements would move forward to the second reading. The possibility exists that points may be raised in that debate that have in fact been discussed by the committee and for which the committee may have compelling arguments in support of the recommendation and in which are effective counterpoints to council's debate. However, additional public input is limited to 5 minutes by council rule. Another shortcoming of this process is council only has the changes as recommended and compared to the current charter. The city attorney was able to provide some input concerning the reasons for the recommendations by the committee. Had I known about the procedure for presenting recommendations to City Council made by the Charter Review Committee, I would have been more diligent in documenting the rationale for each of the recommendations. This observation was the precipitating reason for the following suggestions. That there be, at the orientation for the next Charter Review Committee, you all, include the following be assembled for an orientation package for the committee. As there usually is, a presentation by the city attorney on the Sebastian city ordinances pertaining to the Charter Review Committee and a summary of the Florida Sunshine Law requirements. Each member should, by virtue of the presentation by the city attorney, be aware of the fact that the Charter Review Committee is a recommending body and that City Council can and does decide that some change elements as recommended by the committee are deleted from the changes going forward to the community-wide ballot. Details of the process concerning the initial presentation of the recommendations including the format as described below for the presentation to the council. Thank you, Fred. Therefore, it doesn't go on too much longer. Therefore, as part of the orientation, each member of the Charter Review Committee should be made aware of these expectations at the first meeting by way of an orientation manual. Each member is required to review the model charter city published by the National City League, the National Civic League. There is a website. It is long, okay? But it comes from the National Civic League, who I didn't do that, did I?
Wales.
The this document is the 8th edition of a paradigm for city charters. It goes through various orientations that the city may have, whether it is a mayor-driven council or a mayor-driven city, whether it is a council that elects its own mayor, but every article that we review in our charter, there is a model article that is contained in this 8th edition of this particular, the model city charter. And the web address I recommended should be in writing and as part of the initial orientation documentation so you all could go to it. Each member should be required to do some research and formulate his or her opinion on the matters at issue between meetings. Each member should then be required to submit in writing to the city clerk for distribution to the rest of the committee their position on the sections being discussed, whether it be for or against, at least 1 week prior to the next meeting. At the end of the discussion and voting for the debated changes, a summary would be prepared discussing the rationale for the recommended changes. At the end of the committee's work and for the meeting just prior to the first public meeting, each section wherein changes are recommended and the accompanying rationale for those changes needs to be the topic and should be prepared and distributed to the committee for final review. Each member should be encouraged to attend the city council meeting at which the first reading occurs. Each member will, after the committee has been dissolved, submit their thoughts on process improvement. This needs to be accomplished on an informal basis. Therefore, 1 or 2 members need to either volunteer or be appointed by vote of the committee to gather the information, combine it into a single document, and distribute it to other committee members. Once everyone has had a chance to review the final document, it should be made part of the orientation manual. Since council has the opportunity to debate the recommended changes using as much time as it feels necessary, the committee should meet with the full council to have a dialogue about the recommended changes. These are my suggestions. The dialogue can happen in one of several venues. The committee can attempt to use the public comments portion of the regular city council meeting. However, the time for that presentation is limited by rule to 5 minutes. Council can grant additional time, but rarely will this time go beyond 10 minutes. This rule is necessary, obviously, from a pragmatic perspective, otherwise the meetings would go on forever. A second possibility is to have council call a special session solely for the review and dialogue about the recommended changes and the supporting rationale for those changes. However, calling a special session of city council requires a number of special steps for the meeting to occur. Another possibility is to have council attend the public sessions the committee is required to hold so the committee's recommendations and supporting rationale can be presented to council and they have a chance for input. Further, the dates for the public meetings are determined usually at the first meeting of the Charter Review Committee. This happens due to the rules surrounding when meetings can occur and the required notification to the public can be produced. Council can be made aware of those dates and then can attend. After dialogue has occurred, the committee has the opportunity to revise part or all of the section or subsections. Then a final document is prepared for delivery to council prior to the first reading. The committee can be more effective in the initial presentation and perhaps shorten the time for council meeting consideration. This approach could go a long way toward having all recommendations moved to the ballot. Then, as should be the case, the community residents have the opportunity to make the final decision. The difficulty is that we encountered in the last one is no council member ever attended a meeting. The only thing that they had to go with was the minutes from the meeting. And the minutes, by nature of minutes, are to some degree condensed. So if we want to propose changes to the charter on an individual basis, that I strongly recommend that documentation be provided by us, by the person who wants to do that, defending why they want this change to take place, and that be incorporated into the minutes. That way, when council reviews the minutes, they have the arguments that we have made that they can review and see it in detail. Okay? Oh, by the way, okay, I missed the notification in the paper, but I have thrown my hat in the ring, and I'm supposed to appear in council on Wednesday to be appointed to this committee. So goes beyond that. Hi, Carolyn. But those were my thoughts from what we went through before. I don't know, Louise, up to you.
Not up to me.
I mean, any other comments or anything on anything that I have said? I will give this to Jeanette so it can be included with the minutes. There was a page that I submitted to be included with the August 11th minutes that was a bit of a condensation with this, the August 11th minutes of 2011, okay? So thank you for your attention, and if I do get appointed, I look forward to working with you. Thanks, Fred.
Amber Alert.
We got two. So, good evening, committee. My name's Rob Messersmith. I live here in the city of Sebastian, lived here for a bit over 30 years now. I also want to make it a point to put this on the record before I begin discussing what I want to discuss this evening. I do work for the city of Sebastian. I actually report directly to the city manager. I've already discussed what I'm going to discuss tonight with him. Have gotten his blessing, make sure that, you know, there's no perception of, you know, bypassing chain of command. And he said it was okay with him for me to discuss this evening. In working for the city of Sebastian, I've come to find out a few interesting things about how things have come to be as they are. And one of the things that's kind of bothered me is when we elect our city council, we elect the majority of our city council on an off-election year. So we have, you know, the years that, you know, we normally have an election, this year being one of them, we're only going to elect 2 of our 3 council members. The off ones where there is no election happening, when we have even lower voter turnout, that is when we're electing 3 of our council members. And I don't know about y'all, but I see that as not necessarily in the best interest of the city. How to fix that, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I'm assuming that would be what would fall to you and ultimately city council, and after that, ultimately the people, how to fix that. But I figured I'd bring it up and make sure it hit the radar for this year's charter review. And that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Any other public input?
Where are we going to begin this evening the review process?
We're going to begin with section 1.02, extraterritorial powers, and then go forward.
What page is
Anyway,
that on, please?
That's a
3 of 27.
Thank you.
3 of 27.
15 of 28.
In your packet.
15, 28. There you go.
1 of 20 or 3 of 27.
Okay. That's good. So basically,
so
we've
that
all
we're all on the same page. It's 327, is that correct? Page 327?
Oh,
Not in my package.
not in my packet.
That's
I
okay.
think the best
I
way
know where I am.
to reference it would be Article 1.
Yeah, Article
Creation
1,
and powers.
creation of powers.
Because there's different page numbers. So Part 1 is the charter, Article 1 is creation and powers.
All right, then we will go forward from there. Anyone has anything on that? If not, we'll move to the next section. That would 1.03,
1.02?
02, did we skip 02?
Okay,
Uh,
1.02, acquisition of property.
I had a question. Some of the things that I found are, not semantics isn't the right word, but for instance, in 2, it says docks, wharves, and seawalls. There is no mention of seawalls in the copy that follows there, but the other things are mentioned. Things like that, is that something that we're supposed to concern ourselves with? There's also a lack of mention of canal walls, which, from being here a year, it seems like an issue in this town, and it's not mentioned in there. Is that something we're supposed to be concerned with, or does that have like a major thing to change that or to correct those things? You know, in 4, there's no mention of mooring fields, which is an issue right now before council. Is that something we're supposed to do? I don't know. Is it something this committee's
Well,
supposed
you
to do?
know what, Dick, I had written down what you just brought up. I know that I believe it was last year when the folks on one of the canals came before the board and asked who is gonna pay for it, whether or not it was the responsibility of the homeowner or whether or not it was the responsibility of the city. If I am correct here, that the city wound up paying for it. I may be wrong, but that what I had written that down as one of my thoughts also. And about the moorings, that was just brought up at the last city council meeting. So these are relevant, and I don't believe they were brought up 5 years ago.
I would, if we could stay focused on number 2 for a moment. With regards to the canal issue, and probably any other changes that we make, I think sometimes it's going to come down to, are we legally obligating the city to do something by our recommended changes? And when we consider what the gentleman spoke about earlier about council reviewing everything that we do and making their own decisions, they will receive input as well as to the legality of the suggested changes. I know that the city is debating, or there are different opinions at this point as to whether or not the city is legally obligated to repair the canals. So I would be hesitant, quite frankly, to add something to the city charter
obligate them.
that would obligate them to do that.
I agree with that.
The other thing that I would point out in paragraph 2, I kind of got a chuckle here because it seemed like we were overreaching, but at the very end of the paragraph, it says, to regulate the manner of using any and all wharves and docks within and without the city. And I don't know how we can do that. We can't regulate outside of the city limits. So unless I'm interpreting that incorrectly, I think that's something, it's a minor change, but it just seems a little silly that we would claim we could regulate something outside of the city limits.
I think part of what we do here is wordsmithing and cleaning up some of the language, and certainly some terms are in common usage, used interchangeably. I have heard that the canal walls are always called seawalls.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay?
Because it's a wall that keeps naturally flowing water away from you, so it's it has nothing to do with the sea. It's just like in your attic, you might have something to do with a knee wall, has nothing to do with knees. It's just one of those
Well,
strange
you know
words.
what, I think that it's a point well taken, that the verbiage here is broader than we may think.
Yes, and some of my questions in the first paragraph have to do with cleaning up archaic language, but I also know that it's not easy to get amendments through, and sometimes we skip over things that are, everybody knows it's archaic just because it's not worth bringing it to an election unless it has an impact and would cause someone to, for instance, say, look, your charter says that the city is to have market houses. I don't even know what one is, but the charter says that we should have one, or we should, be in charge of that. So, and whoever heard of detention of the sick? I guess back in the day, if you had a communicable disease, you were detained.
And the same thing with regards to my comment on mooring fields and also in 4, there's no mention of internet or anything like that, which is,
When it comes to mooring fields, I think that is loosely covered under paragraph 3, not by specific mention, but by saying that we control the use of the waters and the land under the waters.
and it goes along with your point about we can get very involved in words rather than
Yeah,
today's.
I think too, as Beth mentioned, we need to be really careful about not overstepping our purposes advisory. We don't make laws, we just advise what the city is to control. How they control it, that's not our business. Am I right? Wrong?
I appreciate what you said, Louise, about prioritizing any recommended changes. I think, we were talking about maybe if we have less amendments, they'll have a better chance. And so maybe that is a good approach, is to prioritize whatever changes we come up with.
We can, as a committee, we can do anything we want to.
Any other input on that? 1.02.
What are we on? Which one are we on?
Suppose we're moving forward to section 1.03.
I did have one thing left in .02, which I think it might be a little nitpicky, but paragraph 6 deals with something that I think is completely outside the purview of the city. Stock to provide for inspecting and regulating the sanitary condition of all butcher, pens, meat markets, and other places within and without the city limits where the products of the same are sold within the city limits, and to provide penalties for the violation of such regulations. I really think that's kind of like, it's not the city's purview the state already regulates, and the county health department regulates, and I don't know that we have any butcher pens left.
Louise, I'm sorry, where is that?
Number 6.
Paragraph 6 of section.
No, I'm sorry. Next page.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
Oh,
sorry, I
okay.
thought we were still on paragraphs 2.
yeah.
Well, it's in the same
So,
section.
so did
1.02.
I. I think we have to be
Okay.
much clearer what we're discussing. I mean, in terms of, let's, when we're going to discuss it, let's go to this piece of paper here and say it's either 4 or 5 on page 427.
That won't work for me.
Good.
Different page numbers.
We all have
Different
different page
pages.
numbers.
A small point on this. These powers do not require the city to act. It just authorizes the city to act.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
It does not require the city to act. It simply authorizes us. This is a part of the charter. This is delineating what the city can do,
Not
not
what
that
it
it must do.
Thank you.
Like it doesn't require the city to operate profitable airports or profitable golf courses. They don't have to be profitable. They just have the opportunity to operate them.
Okay.
Louise, was that it? You need it?
That's all that I had under 1.02.
Anything on the 1.03?
So let me go back to one point, yeah, you're on O2, I don't know, I'm talking about public utilities. Do we have a duty to discuss or mention in here anything about providing internet or Wi-Fi services? I think you had mentioned
That's what I
this
meant.
earlier.
They have a
made that
website.
note. I made that note as well.
Yeah, we have a website.
And there's, there's no mention of that in that discussion.
And the city already has a website, and it's, that's not mentioned in here in any way.
Before, not to address this issue, but just a procedural question, and that's that, is someone making a list of the items that we're talking about, so that maybe we can go back to that list and decide later on whether or not we want to continue talking about it? Will it?
The clerk is keeping track.
As I do the minutes, I can kind of keep a list going,
I
and
think
then you
that
want to
would
go
help
back.
us, yeah.
Okay, okay.
That would be up to our chair.
Thank you.
Have to recognize all that you-
Speakers shall address the board or committee prior to deliberation of each item and shall be directed towards the chair.
Yes, Bob, you can speak.
We discussed this on March 14, 2011. Right? Can you hear me without the microphone?
I think they need it for.
They need it
Yeah.
for record.
To record it? Okay. In looking at this, we were trying to consolidate syntax into one thing, and one of the people said that too many changes would confuse voters, and Mr. Dragonetti agreed with that. And what it got down to was somebody asked the city attorney's opinion on some of this, okay? And he said he thought there was a lot of wisdom in what had been said, and yes, they could consolidate some administrative issues, but you don't have to. He said they have some very important issues in front of them that would change the way that Sebastian has done things for years, and this may not be the year to change those other technical issues. He suggested putting them on the back burner and at the end of the deliberation, and then see what you might want to add back in.
Thank you, Bob.
Beth, talking about the public utilities and the chapter 4, what if we were to think about information, access to information or information capabilities,
Information technology.
rather than
Something
being
along those lines.
specific, because everything that I finally learned how to do disappears 3
Yeah,
days later.
I understand what you're saying, but is technology is just like cars in the same way as every year there's a new model, every year there's a new technological innovation. I read somewhere South Korea, they already have advanced telecommunications technologies that are way advanced from what we have here in the United States. So I would agree with that specific language because of the way technology constantly changes. I would agree with your point on that.
Information technology, is that what you're saying? Is that the
I don't know
words?
exactly how to say it, but
Something along those lines.
Okay.
I would agree to.
Oh.
That way, the next time the Charter Review Committee meets, there's no need for a change in that specific area. It's already, because it's such a broad area, it's such a broad technology. You're talking about Wi-Fi, you're talking about cellulars, you're talking about a lot of different services. So.
So are you going to make that into a proposal?
well, I don't know, are we making specific proposals?
I
or-
thought we were going to keep a list and then
And then review?
prioritize.
Yeah,
And
but this is the
prioritize.
way we would do it, though, right?
Pardon?
This is the way we would do it. Make a proposal to, in keeping with Robert Rules of Order, that we,
That's fine.
so,
Well, then I would propose that under public utilities, we add to that paragraph that
Construct, extend, maintain, operate.
to furnish any and all public services, including internet, or, excuse me, information technology, et cetera, et cetera.
okay, sounds good.
Now, are we following Robert's rules? Is that what we're doing? Is that a motion?
Yes.
Then I will second that motion.
A motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign?
And in going with that way that we're going to proceed, if we're on section 6, I would agree with Louise that I think that this whole paragraph needs to be eliminated.
Which one, on 6?
Yeah. It would be section 1026.
Right. We have a motion, do we have a second?
I would second
Second.
that.
A motion and second that section 6 be removed, and that's the one that says stock, is that correct? So we have a motion and second, all in favor, signify by aye.
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 And opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Can I ask a question that you brought up? What does without the city limits really mean?
Extraterritorial. outside the city limits.
Any territory or specific territory or what? Any,
Outside of the city limits.
just anywhere outside the city limit? Could be in Los Angeles. I mean, theoretically. I mean.
Theoretically.
Okay, okay. All right.
We'll move forward to section 1.03. Any input from the committee? Seeing none, having none, move forward. Section 1.04. Pretty simple. Move forward. Section 1.05.
I had a question on 1.05. The city allows businesses that are in operation after annexation to continue in operation as they were. What if that business violates a city ordinance of some sort? The city annexes that area, the business is in that area, but that business is now in violation of a city ordinance, yet it says it's okay for them to continue to operate.
I don't know, does
What
that
comes
mean that
first, the
they've been
cart or the horse?
grandfathered in because they were annexed, basically?
I would have, I understand what you're saying, but I would have absolutely no problem with allowing them to continue doing what they were doing, because it's like, that would be a taking of, to tell a business that we're going to annex the property where you're located, but now you can't do your business, that's a taking, and I would be opposed to that.
So it's okay as it is the point.
Yeah, I think
It was
there's-
just a question
If there
I
was a
had.
business that was so heinous that the city of Sebastian would not want that within its boundaries, then they should not annex that land. Annexations always go through a big, long process. They're not automatic. You don't just go and grab land. You contact the people who own it, or they contact the city, and it's, annexations are not easy, nor should they be. But I would feel real strongly that we don't want to take anybody's livelihood away from them, just for the privilege of being among us.
I can think of some businesses the city wouldn't want.
Then they should not annex that land. That's my personal opinion.
Any further discussion on that? You have a motion or anything? No? Okay. Move forward to Article 2, Section 2.01. .02, 2.03.
Now you're on fire.
Can I go back to 2.02 again?
Okay.
Being the new person here, is 1 year enough time? I mean, obviously, it's been around for a long time, but 1 year enough time for a person to live in the city to run for council? I mean, it seems like a short period of time. I mean, I've been here a little over a year, and I'm just learning so many things. I guess I'm answering my own question. If I was really interested in running for council, I'd learn a lot more than I have, right? Okay. Sorry I brought it up. Sorry I brought it. Strike that from the record.
While we're on that, can I ask you to define what a qualified elector is?
Okay.
That is a term of art in election law, meaning that it is
State's election law.
correct. Meaning that someone is properly registered to vote. Qualified elector would be a registered voter.
Any other questions on that?
I mean, I just wonder why in section 1, we use the term qualified voters. Okay, plural, or instead of qualified electors. Why do we change from qualified voters to qualified elector?
I would assume probably different scriveners at different times. But that would be
I
within your
think that's
purview.
hair splitting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah, it is, but
fairly
it just
evident.
raises like why somebody wrote this and said voters in section 1 and came down to the very next sentence and changed the term to elector instead of a voter. Kind of look at it and you go, what are they trying to say that's changing? It seems that we're talking about the same thing, but we're using two different terms to describe it, and it's like, that just gives rise to raising. You go, why are we doing that?
Well, I don't, when I read it, I again was brought to this conclusion of there are a number of words that mean the same thing.
Yeah, I have no problem with this. Elector and voter are interchangeable in my opinion.
No problem.
I'm a lumper, not a splitter of hairs. It's
Write that down.
38 years worth of intelligence work. I don't do that.
Keep moving.
Now we're going to go to 2.03.
Yes.
Yes.
I think this is the one that we were talking about at the beginning.
We've been waiting on.
And seems like there's a consensus here, so that it needs to be changed. So I'll just throw something out to get us started, and that's that this idea of having elections every year is an inefficient way to run our government. It is costly. And with voter apathy the way it has been, it certainly is not contributing positively to the election process. But I have more to say about that in terms of the term, which is the very next section 204, and they kind of intertwine. I personally believe that our council members should be serving 4 years instead of 2. And I have a number of reasons for thinking that way. One of them, I currently serve as an inlet district commissioner in a 4-year term, and I'm wrapping up my 3rd term. But I can tell you that even on the Sebastian Inlet District, there is a learning curve, which is even more so for a city council member. By the time a council member is elected and gets through that first year, they are already thinking about whether or not they want to run again, or if they do, how to get reelected. So I think that I know that this conversation has taken place every time. Every time.
We've beaten this to death the 3 times that I've been on this committee. 4 years, if you get the wrong person, is a very, very long 4 years. My own feeling is that this works, and being a simple human being, if it works, I don't want to fix it. Whether people are going to come out and vote by juggling and rearranging this issue, I think doesn't matter. If they're going to vote, they're going to vote. And if they're not going to vote, then they're just not going to vote.
So Dan, are you saying that you like the odd even? the way
I
it's
don't
written
think it
out, too?
matters. I don't think it matters.
You don't think it matters?
Number one, I'm opposed to 4 years strongly, but we've been doing it this way, and if you're worried about people voting, if you're a voter, you're a voter, and you get out and you vote. If you're not a voter, and you you want to sit at home, no matter how we juggle this, and what kind of gymnastics we do, it's not going to matter. If they choose not to to vote, they're not going to vote.
But what happens in the odd number of years when the state does not have an election and the city of Sebastian is the only one electing 2 council members or 3 council members during an off-year election, and the city taxpayers have to foot that bill because there's no other election going on?
Yeah,
Then what do
I've
we do?
stated my position very clearly. I have nothing to add to that. I'm sure there are people that might disagree with me, but that's my opinion.
I don't think that from my perspective that I would really expect more people to come out and vote. But I do share the conviction that there is a learning curve that is not even approached at the end of 1 year. Many times not at the end of 2 years even. I've seen it. I think it's unfair to the council member who's been there a long time to have to go over and over and over the same basic material for an entire year, every year, which sometimes happens and certainly could happen more often than that. And very often a tremendous amount of energy and angst occurs simply because there is this large learning curve. And I've been, I'd say, involved in how governments operate for a very long time. I've paid attention for a very long time. I still don't have any idea how some things occur or why they occur that way. And I think the person who is newly elected, oftentimes, and I'm sure that most of you who pay attention, most people run for an office because they have a personal reason, strong, compelling personal passion or reason. And once they get elected, they find out that it's like, oh my gosh, so much more than that. And I think it's a disservice to the public who elect them. I have some other ideas about it too, but you're right, we have beat it to death. Never seems to go anywhere. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying to make it better, I guess, in my opinion.
I would like to respond to the comment about what happens if you get one person on council who is not doing a good job, and they're there for 4 years. I've been watching this city council since the late 90s, and the high turnover of council members takes us to the beginning point every year, when you have people that perhaps are not doing the will of the voters. One person cannot overrule a council. You have 5 council members. So while a person could be disruptive or ineffective or not being helpful, you still have 4 other council members to deal with that. And when I referenced looking at the councils since the 90s, just by seeing the incumbents being reelected over the last 5 or 6 years. A couple of our council members now have served a very long time. And I think that that's proof that, while maybe one person isn't doing what they need to do, the other 4 council members can take care of that issue by reaching consensus, by working together. So I don't agree that if you get one bad apple in there, that the whole dozen is spoiled. I just don't go along with that. I think that if there is a bad apple, that it can be resolved through management, through council members working together, and through the city manager and charter officers working together.
Do you have any thoughts on term limits, or have there been discussions in the
Oh
past?
boy, do I have thoughts on term limits.
In past charter review advisory boards about term limits? Have there been?
I don't think we've ever discussed term limits, but I love the idea of term limits.
No, I believe that we did the last go round.
Did we?
Yes, if I may again.
Yeah, I'm always willing to discuss term limits, I'll have you
Yeah,
know.
what we actually recommended,
Hey, wait a minute.
oh,
Yeah. Point of order.
Point of order. Yeah, there
Okay.
you go. Point of order. Mrs. Omak, you wish to speak?
yes, sir.
You may.
Thank you. What we actually recommended as follows: the election of 3 council members. The 3 council members shall be elected in 2011 at the time of the general election in November. Council members elected in 2011 shall serve until their successors are sworn in after the general election in November 2014. The 3 council members shall be elected in 2014 and every 4 years thereafter at the same time of the general election in November. Item B, election of 2 council members. 2 council members shall be elected in 2012 and every 4 years thereafter at the time of the general election in November. C, term limits. Notwithstanding any other provision of this charter, effective with the terms of council members scheduled to commence November 2011, no person shall be elected as a council member for more than 2 consecutive terms. Neither service as a council member prior to the term scheduled to commence in November 2011, nor service of a partial term subsequent to November 2011 shall be considered in applying the term limitation provision of this section. That's what we actually recommended. That was the language. The other thing, addressing Ms. Mitchell's comment earlier, you need to read the charter in concert with the other sections of the charter. For example, in talking about this one section, the city council, the composition, where we talked about the qualified voters versus the qualified elector, the first part of it is talking about members elected by the qualified voters. The second part, the eligibility, is to hold office, that the person has to be a qualified elector. So you really have to read these in concert with each other. The same thing with terms and term commencement and what else can be happening. If you go on to read other parts of the charter, there is, and this same issue came up. How do you get rid of somebody that's a dud that you may want to hire and you're stuck with, in essence, for 4 years? But council can police themselves. And also, if you go over to section 208, section 209, judge of qualifications, the Florida Division of Elections, the Florida Elections Commission, or the courts shall determine issues relating to the election and qualifications of city council members and of the grounds for forfeiture of their office. So you really we are unable to read one section and say we're going to try and change that without seeing how it interrelates with the other sections within that same article.
Mr. Chair, I would like to try and get some meat on the bones here, and I would like to make a motion that we make the same recommendation that was made back in 2011. And I'd like to discuss the term limits separately. And so the motion would be on page, I know it's confusing, but it's page 11 of 28. It's the second copy that we received. And the motion would be to amend the charter so that council members shall be elected in even number years instead of having elections every year, and be elected to 4-year terms instead of 2-year terms, provided that for purposes of transition, council members elected in 2016 shall serve until 2020. That would be my motion.
We have input.
Second.
Magistrate.
Second.
Before a second.
Before we ask for a second on that, I would like to bring to the committee's attention House Bill 7059, which is currently pending in Tallahassee. For example, this bill proposes to amend Chapter 100, just to show one example that the amendment is proposing. Each election for municipal office within a county must be held on the same date as the general election if it is in an even-numbered year, or the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November if it's held in an odd-numbered year. The supervisor elections shall determine whether elections for the municipal office are held within the county in an even-numbered years, odd-numbered years, or both.
So it doesn't matter
So
what we say.
So that's why I would encourage you to table this discussion, as I mentioned before, because the legislature might take this out of your hands.
I'm not willing to withdraw my motion.
Yeah, Tallahassee has that, but when are they expected to vote on that? Do we know?
We have no further intelligence.
Right.
We're trying.
No, I think they're having some budget issues. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed with a like sign.
No.
Motion carries.
Can we discuss term limits?
Yes.
I feel we should have a term limit. But the previous recommendation for 2 terms, I think, was very limited. I think it should be 3. Obviously, the people sitting on the dais thought it was too short.
What was that, 4-year terms?
Well, no, that was
Yeah.
a 2-year term.
4-year, no, that was leaving it at 4-year. The recommendation was 4-year terms,
Okay.
But
But-
2 terms.
limited to 2. I think it could be limited to 3.
Okay, you get my opinion, like it or not. Fortunately, we live in America, and we have automatic term limits through the election. And if somebody is not performing, we have the option to limit their term to 1 by simply not voting for them again. And I think that's probably the only kind of term limit that I would be interested in any body of government. That's my personal opinion.
Any other input on term limits? Mr. Dragonetti?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Term limits? Any input on term limits?
I've already made my opinion known. I think we should have term limits.
And those terms should be,
We have a committee here, they can decide that. I have my own opinion.
Louise, are you advocating 2 or 3 terms? Or,
I do not want term limits at all. I don't think they're necessary. I think the electoral process limits
should-
terms.
you-
I have a question for those, and I know there are, in any group I've been in, there are people who favor term limits. What happens if you end up with someone who is just the gold standard and you cannot reelect that person? We had that happen on a committee here in the city of Sebastian, and they ended up finally changing the rules for that committee makeup simply because there were some really good people who were willing to serve and were not allowed to serve because they had already served. So then we end up with less than optimum service, perhaps. That's just.
is that volunteer committees or we're talking about
No,
city election?
I'm talking about term limits. Term limits of themselves, not connected to any individual. And, certainly you have the people who are just golden, and then you have the bozos. And of course, nobody wants to keep a bozo around. But the golden standard person, what if you have a term limit and that person cannot serve any longer because of term limits? As a matter of fact, I think the state legislature is run that way.
Yes.
Yes, that's true.
Yes.
It's 3 and you're out.
Yeah, and I'm not too sure that's wonderful.
Well, I remember living in New York City. In New York City, the state legislature doesn't have those term limits, and unfortunately, you have some very unscrupulous individuals that are in power for a long period of time, including what's his name, Sheldon, former Speaker of the House of New York. And again, I'm in favor. That's my personal opinion. That's my philosophical opinion. I'm in favor of term limits, but there's always going to be a pro and con towards that issue. And again, living in New York, I witnessed what a state and even a city, New York City itself. I'm almost certain that the city council in New York City does not have term limits. And again, you see individuals that are there for a long period of time, and that seat becomes who they are. They forget who they serve and who they represent. They often forget the individuals who elected them, and the longer that they're there, they often forget about who they are and more about power and authority. But I'm not trying to I'm not trying to be stereotypical. There's just some bad apples that are out there in various positions that lead to examples as I alluded to. So that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I concur. That's why I recommend it. No one is irreplaceable. Everyone can be replaced. Doesn't matter how good they are, they can be replaced.
Yeah, I don't like lifelong politics. Our country was formed on the idea that if you run for office, once you finish your term, you went back and became productive members of society. Nowadays, those people are making careers out of it, political careers, and I don't think a lot of things are getting done with career politicians. So.
Oh, I think you can get off for 4 years and run again.
Yep.
I like that one. I've always been in the favor of term limits, and I always have felt, like you brought up, that there are many out there who might want to run, but are reluctant to run against an incumbent who has been in there a long while. And I've always favored term limits, and that's my opinion.
So, do we have a motion from anyone?
Well, I started it. I'll make the motion that we include, we might as well include it right in.
No, this would be separate,
It would be a separate,
yes.
yeah, maybe we need to,
Well, I hadn't given this much thought as to where specifically it would be addressed, but we will obviously need a new section.
May I suggest that we get that down in writing and then bring it forward as a motion, maybe the next time we meet?
Yes, that's a good idea, that we table it and someone bring it in writing for the next meeting. Have a motion to table it and bring it
Well,
in
would
writing?
anybody care to suggest where we would, putting it in writing is not that difficult, but where would you put it? We kind of have, are we going to add,
It would be in this section.
reorder the sections?
I think that would be a decision reached by our attorney. Where to put it would be clearly a legal issue. That's above our pay grade.
At which point it depends on the language posed.
I have a question. Who is going to write this?
Anyone,
I didn't make the motion.
everyone.
I didn't make the motion.
Well, I can draft, I'll draft language. I have no problem doing that.
Bruce Hoffman is going to draft the language. I think.
I'll get it to Jeanette, and she can email it to everybody
Yeah.
with...
But I think they had that already covered before from several other meetings. Is that correct, Mr. Zomack?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, what I read was exactly the language that we had recommended before, okay? And it was included under section 2.03, elections and terms. So the language is already there. I mean, the dates are obviously erroneous at this point in time. But two other things that we considered when we debated this before, and still opted to go forward with our proposal to have term limits. You have two council members that are dead set against this. Okay? Just recognize that as reality, okay? The second part of it is when you do term limits in a small municipality like this, you have difficulty getting people to run for the office. And even with that in mind, yeah, that's what you do. I mean, the last time around, there would not even have been an election had Mr. Gilliam opted not to run. The only reason we had to have an election was because Mr. Gilliam decided to run. Just those are considerations.
I don't know, maybe people see it as the same ones run all the time, so.
Exactly.
And that's why people don't run. I think we have a lot more younger, progressive people in this community that would step up and do just that. But we can't run against the establishment because you don't have an opportunity to go anywhere.
Exactly, and I think some people need a voice. You know, some people, they see, they don't realize that they can run for public office. They don't realize that they have the potential to run for public office because they see the same individuals that are running. They see the same individuals that are in the same position. There are hundreds of people that teachers, hundreds of individuals that have the opportunity to run. It doesn't have to be the same individuals that are running. Give people the opportunity, and they will rise. They will rise to leadership. You just have to give them the opportunity.
They have to believe that they have an opportunity
Exactly.
first and foremost, so.
Boy, do I agree with you. That's exactly correct.
So we're going to table that. Mr. Hoffman's going to write
I'll
the
draft.
language for that. We already have the language written, I believe, from
Mr.
others.
Zomack and I serve on other committees together. We can be in contact with each other, so.
Not if he's appointed.
Correct.
Well, that's true,
Right.
not if you
Correct.
become
That would be
one
the point.
Which brings
on
up,
Wednesday, that would end that real quickly.
Right.
brings up a
Correct.
point I wanted to mention, as this might engender some discussion. Florida does have very strict sunshine laws, and even though this is an advisory body, all discussions regarding matters that this committee entertains must be held in the sunshine and properly noticed, and so there
Well-
cannot be any emails back and forth or telephone calls.
Well, then, may I suggest that could we do this? I make a recommendation, I don't think it needs to be a motion, that Mr. Zomack pass the language to Ms. Williams and it be included in the agenda package for next month. or
I
next
think
meeting.
Jeanette has that already. Do we have that already from the other meeting, the language that was written about term limits?
I have to look it up, but I'll look it up.
Did you make it part of the record in 2011?
I believe it is.
I'm sure it is.
We did a was-is thing, and the stuff that's highlighted, were all the recommendations.
Legal counsel?
Yes.
Would House Bill 7-059, it could obviate the need for a vote. Am I correct in assuming that?
You could have this,
Yes.
sweetheart.
Oh, it's okay.
Give it back to me when you're
But if you'd like a copy.
No, sir. But it could obviate the need for us acting on this. Is
This
that
all
correct?
could become moot. The legislature
That's.
could perhaps preempt this whole thing and dictate exactly what the cities and the counties will do.
At my age, I like to make sure I'm understanding exactly what's being said. So that is correct. That could obviate the need for us voting on this. Okay.
Which is one of the reasons why I suggested tabling this.
Mm-hmm.
I think this came out to be the whole was-is thing.
I think, Jeanette, are we good over there? Are we good to proceed forward?
On this one, yes.
Oh, okay, good. All right, I guess now that we have that information, so now we will move forward to 2.05 compensation. I don't know that anybody has given any thought to it.
I have.
But if you have, I have some thoughts as well, but,
Oh, good, good.
I did too.
so, as a chair, I would defer to
Well,
Beth,
as the vice
first-
chair, I would defer to one of our members
Okay,
first.
Dick.
It struck me, being new to the area, listening to what's going on in other cities around here, that this is rather low compensation for the job that they have. It also struck me kind of funny that the vice mayor would be paid the same thing as the other council members, that it should be some middle ground there. But I guess my general comment is it enough for the job that they do? And if they're really doing their job, they're spending an awful lot of time. And if you put it on an hourly basis, it's a lot more than what $450 or $300 covers, believe me. That's why you don't get a lot of people running for it, too.
Permission to speak?
Yes, sir.
I was reading the newspaper, and I was really stunned to find that Port St. Lucie pays its councilpersons $50,000.
Yeah, I think that's the mayor.
Pardon?
I think that's the mayor, is that correct?
No, I think the councilpersons, as I recall correctly.
Wow.
I don't know if we can, our poor little city can afford that. But what Dick Crowell said, I agree with. They're really, for what they do and the responsibility that they have, they are tragically underpaid. I'm willing to pay more taxes to get them a raise.
Well, I'll go back to the discussion that was just held over the benefits, the health benefits that were discussed. And I think our council's already spoken on that by their vote, which I believe was 3-2, not to increase the benefits, and that the reason for serving on this city council for such a I don't want to call us small because we are the biggest city in the county, but the reason for serving is service. It's not to get compensated. I think it's fine.
I think that this increase in pay has come up at every single time as well, and the council has always turned it down. But I think that we're also not thinking of, there is a stipend that goes along with this, which is, I believe...
Travel.
Yeah, I think it's, and they all take all of it, if I'm not mistaken. And it is about $300 a month in addition to this. So this is not quite as paltry as it looks. And it is a part-time job.
Well, if I may make a comment or two, I am referencing back the health insurance issue and that whole discussion and incorporating your comments as well. I really believe that the amount that they're paid on a monthly basis needs to be increased. I'd be curious to know when the last time they had an increase. On the other hand, I'm also uncomfortable with the present arrangement of an expense account. I think that to have better transparency, what we need to do is to give them a raise on their monthly stipend and then have them submit for reimbursable expenses. I think that they should be reimbursed any real expenses that they incur. But the way I understand the arrangement right now is they submit for an expense check of $300 a month, and there's really no backup, there's no reason to document how they incurred those expenses. So I'd like to meet everybody halfway here. I would suggest, this may be outrageous, but I would suggest we double the amount of the monthly stipend and do away with the expense account, but allow them to submit for reimbursable qualified expenses.
I think that's a good idea too, but there's something else. It's politically incorrect maybe to vote yourself a raise if you want to get reelected.
Could you repeat that,
Historically,
please?
that's the case.
Come closer to the mic and please repeat that.
Pardon?
He didn't
Please
hear what you
repeat
said.
that.
I said it's politically considered maybe suicide to vote yourself a raise if you want to get reelected. I mean, historically, that's happened a lot too. So I think that, like anybody else, they're hesitant to vote themselves a raise unless it comes from some other body.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, but I agree with Beth, and maybe they could wave the banner of we're giving up our expense account in favor of, there will be no more expense account that isn't verified, and that banner might be waved then. But I like that suggestion very much. I particularly like the idea. That seems to be very legitimate and very fair.
Yes, I agree. Do we have a
I
motion?
agree with, there's a need to fix this, yes. And how we fix it, we can reach a midway point, as Ms. Mitchell, suggested. But they need more money. They really do. For the time that goes into this, just the reading alone, is voluminous. So, let's give them a break. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, they put a lot of work and time and effort into those jobs. So I believe they certainly need more for sure. And I like the idea of doing away with that expense account and just giving them whatever they actually earn.
Yes.
Yes,
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
So do we have a motion?
Could we also change one other thing or suggest one other thing, and that the vice mayor gets paid something different than the other council members? I mean, something that's a middle ground. In other words, instead of maybe it's $375 instead of $300, that's halfway between $450 and $300. double 375, in other words, if that's what we're...
I have a different approach.
Okay.
A different approach might be that in the event the vice mayor is acting as the mayor, then he would get what the mayor's getting.
Right.
That works.
So we can incorporate language into the motion.
Okay, well, it sounded like everybody agreed with the concept of the expense account, but I'm not sure where we are with the dollar amounts. So maybe we could have some more discussion about that before I make a motion.
I would double it. Is that, how do you folks feel about that? I would just double the amounts down here. I think that would be reasonable.
What is a, I'm not going by my experience, what is an executive, a responsible executive gets paid today on an hourly basis?
North
50,
of
75, $100 an hour, whatever. I mean, so we're talking about the mayor spending 4 hours or 5 hours a month on the job as mayor. It doesn't make sense. So it's got to be at least double to me.
So you agree with double?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? You agree with doubling the amount?
I agree, at
here?
least doubling it,
Oh,
yes.
okay, well, and I see a lot of
Yep.
people nodding their heads here, so that's good.
Okay. All right, well, then I'll go ahead and make the motion that we double the amounts that are currently allocated. I don't know how to phrase this, but in the event that the vice mayor acts as the mayor, then he would be compensated similar to the mayor. And that we eliminate, the expense account is not actually listed in here. So I don't know if we can eliminate it or not, but we can make that suggestion. And then add a line item that says council members will be reimbursed for their qualified expenses.
Second that motion.
Yes.
We have a motion, second, discussion?
Yes, with regard to the vice mayor situation, it would, what if he or she is in that position for 1 week? Do you split the month's compensation? I think it gets to be complicated doing it that way. I just thought of that, you know. A lot of times the vice mayor will step in for the mayor for particular.
And I don't think they should be paid more for a ribbon cutting or something like that. So maybe a period of time?
Extended period of time, 30 days or more.
That's what I'm getting at.
Okay,
Yeah, that works.
okay.
Add that.
I'll amend
Mr.
that
Chairman?
motion.
Motion amended to
Mis-
30 days or more, vice mayor serving as capacity as mayor to receive same compensation as mayor.
Perfect.
And I second that motion again.
It's been motion and second. Any further discussion?
Yes, if
Mr.
I
Zhang?
may. Okay.
It'll be on the board.
You can
Well, we went over all this stuff 5 years ago. Okay? To some of us, this is reinventing the wheel. One of the things that we wanted to do at that point in time was to find out what they're actually being paid. You know, what are these people, when at the end of the year, okay, what's the W-2 look like from here? Okay, before we started making decisions on what to change and how, we really don't have the line item detail on what they're getting. The second thing that we talked about, and we ultimately did not do, was to allow for automatic increases tied to something like Social Security, okay, or to whatever cost of living adjustment or something like that, okay? So those were the two things that we tried to do the last time and ultimately left it alone.
You're saying at face value, and we can't take this amount at face value, is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, we have a motion on the floor.
So we have a motion. Any further discussion?
Well, I just have one point. I agree with Bruce in terms of, I just, again, putting my personal opinion onto the floor. I sit on the Budget Review Advisory Committee, and I just can't approve increase. When you look at the Budget Committee, we see what the majority of council members spend their time on. The majority, I think, is on city council meetings. I just can't see, and again, this is my philosophical opinion, I just can't approve an increase. I just can't. And again, most of the council members, I think, for the exception of maybe like 3 or 2, are retired individuals who have spent a long time in industry, have spent a long time in business, and this is a part-time job. It's one of, as us being fellow committee members, this is a volunteer position, not of that of executive compensation. But that's my philosophical opinion.
They don't, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but at what point, I know that obviously there's things that council members have to study, read over, and everything that they don't do in council meetings. These things are done outside of that, and some of them spend an enormous amount of time going through all of this stuff for the city government, and they're not compensated for it. I mean, I understand people are saying that, this is a part-time job. Yeah, they're paying them part-time money for that too. Even if we double it, it's still part-time money. They're not getting any other kind of benefits. They're not getting health insurance. They're not getting anything else. So, in order to put that kind of time that they do in there, I think they deserve to be rewarded for it.
And we also might attract some people other than retirees
Exactly.
to the job.
And one thing that nobody has talked about is the amount of interaction with the public on a daily basis. I know that being a somewhat of a public figure, I can tell you I went to Publix on Saturday afternoon, and I was waylaid by 5 people. And these council members have given up their privacy. They've given up a lot. And so I don't think that doubling their monthly stipend at this point is overly generous or outrageous. I think it's a small gesture for their public service, quite frankly.
Yes.
Beth, you stated it very elegantly.
Oh,
Thank you. Do we have any other discussion? So we have a motion second. All in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Opposed with a like sign.
No.
No.
All right, motion carries. Move forward to the next section, please. Do anybody have anything on the mayor and vice mayor, their duties? Actually, I do have one thing.
Yeah, I got one, if I can start.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, on the mayor. Let me ask, why is the mayor, or the term for the mayor, not stated, yet there's a term for the vice mayor?
Yes, and I had that also. I don't know how we missed that.
I don't know, it just seems to be maybe it was something that was missed.
Yeah, I know.
But in paragraph C, it says the term of the vice mayor shall be for 1 year or until his or her, but there is no comment for the mayor.
Right.
I
Same thing I wrote.
Yeah, I have read it and reread it, and there is no term.
How long does the mayor serve?
A mayor serves, he serves for a year.
Yeah, he serves
When
for
the
a
new
year. I
council
mean,
comes in, they
that's-
re-select a mayor every year, so he could serve,
Which is explained.
if everybody likes him, he could serve year after year, but if him or her, if he's not a popular person,
Well, it just seems.
maybe 1 term.
No, I know it. They generally, yeah, they've rotated them. They've served a couple of years, but it gets voted on every year. But according to what we have here, there is no term. The mayor could serve forever. I guess until.
Change it.
But I would think there should be the term of 1 year listed the same as we do for the vice mayor.
And while we're talking about that, I just have a general question that's been in my mind, and that's that if a mayor is elected right after the election, is there any time during that year that he could be removed by his council members? Or is he a mayor for the year, no matter what?
I don't think there is any provision for unseating what is more of a,
Wow. I'd hate to embark on that one. I really would.
But wouldn't that fall under,
Wow.
I was trying to figure out where
it
it
would
would
fall under forfeiture of office and so on and so forth. I mean, it would be just
Well, no,
like,
because it says this section is mayor's selection and term. So if the council members select him according to this paragraph, but then 6 months later, something bad has happened,
Well, go to two.
But under-
Yeah, they can get rid of it.
208A
Wait, read
or B,
208.
forfeiture,
208.
Yeah.
does,
vacancies in B.
but it doesn't address the mayor.
Yes, office of council member or the mayor shall become vacant upon his or her death, resignation, removal from office in any manner authorized by law, or forfeiture of his or her office.
I think what Beth is saying is Bozo the Clown is still on council. We just don't want him to be our leader. Am I
Right.
right?
Oh, I get you.
Right. I didn't say Bozo. the
No,
Clown.
I'm just picking a name at random.
Yeah. It came to mind. I don't know if it's that important or not. But I do agree that the paragraph should be consistent. If you've got a term in there for the vice mayor, you need a term in there for the mayor. That-
208 seems to address the issue. Section 208.
I don't know if it does.
Well, it says he can be removed from office in any manner authorized by law.
Yeah,
That would require
that's above
our
our pay
attorney
grade again.
to
It's
advise us
that's
as to
legal.
what the
He could be
allowable.
removed as mayor and still remain on the council.
Right, removal from office.
How can he be removed as mayor?
Because it is the office. So they would make a motion to remove him as mayor, but not remove him from the council.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Ooh, thank you.
Back to the 1 year for vice mayor and no term for mayor. Should they be the same?
I think they should be the same.
I have no problem with the way it's been done. They vote every year, they choose among themselves.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it's a great deal.
Okay, should the vice mayor have no term or the mayor have 1 year term?
They each have one year unless voted out or voted for again.
Well, I would make a motion that we amend Section 206A to include the same verbiage as the second sentence in 206C.
Second, that motion.
Was that, oh, okay, thank you.
With regards to term limit.
Yeah, in regards to the term limit of the mayor.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Opposed, a like sign. Motion carries. 1 year added for the mayor. Anything on vacancies or anything? How about general powers and duties?
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
shall appoint, and I'm in 208C, number 2. No scheduled citywide election, or the remaining members of the council shall appoint a replacement within 45 days. If the board's required to meet once a month, according to the charter, the council, not the board, is required to meet once a month, why do we wait 45 days?
Investigate candidates? Consider candidates?
I think this has happened at least once in my memory, and it was just exactly that. It was various different people were suggested and discussed and investigated or considered or even asked, would you serve? So sometimes it takes a little while to find somebody who's willing to take a position when they weren't willing to run for it.
Thank you.
As long as we're talking about Section 208, I did have one question, and it bothered me the last time, so I'm going to bring it up again this time. And that's 208B, under forfeiture of office. The reasons, or the reasons that could cause someone to lose their office. Number 3 is convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude. I think that is such a nebulous term.
It is.
I looked it up today, and this, I've questioned the definition of moral turpitude.
I agree with you. We went through this last time, and I think my suggestion was according to Florida state statute. You broke the law within the state of Florida.
Because there's a lot of...
That's what it should be, because, moral turpitude, that's really nebulous. I mean, you could drink too much Jack Daniels, I don't know. But I concur with you, Louise, I did last time. That's really nebulous there.
I did bring down the state statute, which itself is...
How do you folks
Is there
feel
a
about that?
definition of moral turpitude in the statute?
Yeah.
Murder and murder?
No,
How about
not necessarily.
robbing a bank?
If you want, just out of point of interest, I will read it for you. Florida courts have defined moral turpitude as, quote, the idea of inherent baseness or depravity in the private social relations or duties owed by man to man or by man to society. Florida courts have specifically held that manslaughter by culpable negligence is a crime of moral turpitude. The courts have also held bookmaking as a crime of moral turpitude. The courts have held that a physician selling bogus diplomas and licenses committed a crime of moral turpitude. However, certain crimes, such as possession of a controlled substance, have been held to not be a crime of moral turpitude.
Jeez.
So I think it's something that's really open to
Wow.
the interpretations of the day. What's fashionable? Oh, what's fashionable? What kind of crimes are fashionable?
Yeah, permission to speak.
Yes, sir.
Coming from 38 years in the federal government, I'm so accustomed to quoting the statutes, and we need to look at this and be really specific and say a violation of a Florida state statute. But that's really goes back to our legal counsel, and we need input.
First, I'd like to point out that this section says shall forfeit. Shall is a term of art legally. It says must. So anything you list here, if someone violates any of those, it must happen. So if you use the parameter being in violation of Florida statutes, does that include a traffic ticket? So if a council member gets a traffic ticket, he's off the council?
Okay.
So could we
That's
separate
one of
it
the-
out by?
That's one of the reasons why terms like moral turpitude are included in there, to specify that certain crimes are unacceptable.
But since they're so broad, can't we use something like convicted of a felony or something to that effect?
Well, what about a felony DUI?
I think, and I'm not a lawyer, but convicted of a felony, then, third degree, second degree, first degree felony. I don't know, I really agree with Louise. That troubled us before, and it still troubles me.
Also, in criminal law, it is within the purview of the judge to withhold adjudication, which means that someone is not necessarily convicted. So if someone is arrested for, say, felony DUI, but there was a withhold of adjudication by the judge, is that a conviction or not a conviction?
It would
And
be
then
the
if- and then
lesser
if-
offense, whatever they decided, right?
No, it is the offense, but there is within the purview of the judge to either adjudicate him guilty
Right.
or to withhold adjudication. And if the judge withholds adjudication, then there is no conviction, technically. Often that's handled in a plea arrangement, where someone is facing charges and he pleads nolo contendere, I don't contest it. And in exchange for that, the prosecution recommends, and the judge might find, that there is reasons to withhold adjudication of guilt.
I'd like to ask legal counsel how we could do you have any suggestions how we can fix this? We're not lawyers, so we turn to you for that expertise that you have. There is discomfort with it now and there was before, and we'll all probably be here again in 5 years. So do you have any suggestions of how we could fix that, sir?
Well, the reason why charters and statutes use terms like moral turpitude is that different laws are viewed as more heinous or less heinous. Like, for example, would it be better for someone to be convicted of a felony DUI or a misdemeanor that involves dishonesty? Would you rather have someone who made a mistake once and perhaps had an auto accident while drunk and was adjudicated guilty for a felony DUI, or someone who stole money and pled to a misdemeanor involving dishonesty?
So this isn't all that easy.
That's the reason why in law we use terms like moral turpitude.
Got it.
So that it covers a wider spectrum of things.
Could we, Louise, I'd like to have a copy of what you read to us
Yeah.
so that I could think about it a little bit more.
Actually, if you just go online, you can
Just
you can
Google it.
type in, yeah. You
Google
can
it.
get all kinds, this is just one example, there's all kinds of it
Yeah,
there.
I
No,
think I think legal counsel just gave us some good guidance here, and while it may, we're not lawyers. While it may rest kind of uncomfortably with us, after listening to legal counsel, then I would say that now I understand.
I think it's in benefit to the legal counsel that it covers that broader spectrum.
I would suggest that there have been bodies and agencies that have grappled with this. For example, Palm Beach County has an ethics czar, and they have ethics codes that deal with this sort of thing. And that there are ethics offices in the state government. And so if you want to investigate some of how those agencies deal with these issues, and then perhaps bring it back up.
So if they violated the code of ethics, then it would be a cause for dismissal.
And that deals with things like moral turpitude,
Yeah.
where if you have, say, a council member who files a false expense report, now that we're entertaining the idea of a expense report as opposed to the stipend, and signs his name, and it's $15, and you have another council member who has a felony DUI, made a mistake, and got in an auto accident that involved bodily injury. Which one is more morally reprehensible, which one's not?
Which then is bigger. Were you advocating also that the word shall be changed to must?
No, it's just that to be mindful of the fact that when you make a change, it says this says shall. So if someone falls within whatever change you make, there is no leeway. That person is out.
Mr.
So it's
Chairman?
quite important to consider things dealing with the reason why these are in there, which is to catch violations where people are ethically slippery, involving dishonesty, as opposed to just making an honest mistake.
Mr. Somack?
I know I'm getting to sound like a broken record, but this is exactly the discussion we had on this 5 years ago, okay?
That's interesting.
And legal counsel came from exactly the same perspective, that this gives a degree of flexibility, plus you have changing case law, as you have already pointed out. To try to get more specific than this, you dig yourself into a hole you can't get out of.
I agree.
All right, we've got it. Any other further discussion on that? No? Can we move forward to section 2.09, unless someone has something else on 2.08? Nothing on 2.09. What about 2.10? City council employee relationship. Nothing. 2.11, investigations.
At 2.11, I had a question. City council can investigate, subpoena witnesses, administer oaths, take testimony, require the production of evidence, and so on and so forth. To what end? But they can do all these things. Are they doing it to pass judgment on something, or, I mean, they can do all these things, but to what end? Am I making sense? Why are they doing all these things?
I think it's just set up for them to, if something comes before them that they need to investigate, they need to have the powers to subpoena witnesses and go through and do an investigation, a proper investigation that may be needed, so. It's not saying that they do this all the
What I'm hearing
time.
you say is that there's no limitation on what they can do? Is that it?
I guess I'm looking for closure on the statement in some way, you know. I guess for anything that came before them, they could do these things, and they don't have to pass judgment or make a decision or anything. It's just for information. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
I think the last line says it, to require the production of evidence. In other words, to go further to find something. That's what I kind of get out of that. To require the production of evidence is the last line. So they're allowed to investigate to find further.
Council
Yeah.
also at times sits as a quasi-judicial.
Right.
That was the point I was just going to
Right.
make. There are certain situations, right, that they sit, even certain committees within the city do that from time to time, have to sit in a quasi-judicial manner, right?
Correct.
Which this authorizes them to
do
act in that situation.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I know we just passed 210, and I thought about raising this issue, and I'm not sure it actually applies in this particular paragraph. And when I reviewed the charter, I couldn't find exactly where it applied. So I'm just going to raise the issue, and maybe we can find where it should be. With regards to the relationship between council members and charter officers, nowhere could I find that it was required of city council to do a performance review of the charter officers on an annual basis. And whether it's in section 210 or somewhere else in the document, I would like for us to have that discussion. I do believe it belongs in the charter.
Are they doing that right now on an annual
But they are doing it by policy, and it's not in the charter. I mean, I know they're doing it, but there were times where they weren't doing it. And so if we could put that on the list to return to whenever it comes up appropriately, I would appreciate that.
Okay, so you're asking to table that for our next meeting,
Yeah.
or whenever we come across?
Right,
I think Article 3 would probably where that would be, where that would fall.
okay.
That'll be the next meeting, so.
Okay.
2.12, did we cover? Any input? Section 2.13, emergency ordinances.
And again, there's history that you have here, but it strikes me that affirmative vote of 4 members should be required for adoption. We have 5 members on the council, and if there was a true emergency, it seems to me to find 4 members of council might be difficult. You know, let's say everybody evacuated the town because it was required by law because of a major hurricane or something. How do you get 4 people together?
I think that may fall under the city manager at that point. Is that correct? Mr. Manager, you have anything? Oh, he's gone?
I don't know if it's long
Gonna stick around, huh?
If I recall, they just addressed that. Didn't they just address that within the last several months at council meeting, where they addressed the city manager's ability to take action in an emergency, or they're in the process of addressing that?
I don't know, but I think what we can do is,
I have some recollection on that matter, but I can't tell you for sure. Anyway, going back to hurricanes. I understand your point, but I disagree with it to this. When they know there's a hurricane coming, you've got a whole week ahead of time to have an emergency meeting to decide what the heck you're going to do. And if you don't take the action, then you've just passed over your, you've exhibited bad judgment.
Well, but
That's my experience with hurricanes. You know they're coming, do what you got to do.
yeah, but they're also predicted and then don't happen, or they're more serious than predicted,
Well,
et cetera, so, I mean,
you're back in town.
maybe it's on that
Well, I
list.
think that's why they're in there giving the city manager, and I think that's what it was, to take action. But I wish he was here.
Let's put it on the list.
I think
Put
we
it
can
on
just
the
add that to the list for the next meeting, to have that answered
Yeah,
from the city manager or from the mayor or someone.
If I could just make a comment on this, there are a number of layers of emergency response. You know, the governor declares an emergency, the county declares an emergency. So I can't really think of an action that council would take that 4 wouldn't approve of that hasn't already been declared by someone else.
Or that they would need to,
Yeah.
because ever since the early storms in '04, '05, '06, we've learned a lot of lessons, so.
I can think of one.
What?
Oh.
I don't even want to mention it. The ball of fire coming from the railroad track during a council meeting.
If it's a moot point, that's fine. That's why I just brought it up for this group to just decide if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense.
Can we move on to section 2.14?
Valentine's Day.
Section 2.15. .16.
Yes. In the 5 years that we've had between the last time that we met, we have formed many advisory committees. Among them, the Veterans Advisory, the Youth Advisory, and the Disabilities Advisory. And there may be more. Now, are these advisory committees equal to a standing committee, or are they different? Did you all get that?
I got it.
All right.
A committee is a committee is a committee, whether it's standing or I mean, all the committees are advisory.
Right.
Except for planning and zoning. So, I mean, that's not a committee. But if what you're asking, Carolyn, is do the advisory committees fall into
Right.
this section?
Yes.
That's what the question is. I think so, but I don't know. I'm not.
I mean, we all, every one of the advisory committees does make recommend, help me out,
Recommendations?
thank you, to the 5 up there.
Well, we could ask that question, I suppose. Is the advisory committee the same as a standing committee? Is that?
Yes, they would be. The significance is that they're standing, they don't have to be reauthorized by every council. They're authorized by charter.
Does that answer it, Carolyn?
The advisory committee is authorized by charter.
Wow. I'm not there yet.
They're not a creation of every individual council that changes every year or every 2 years. They're created by charter, so they're authorized to remain in existence after council members leave.
All right. Well, I remember the Disabilities Advisory had been labeled the handicap, and over the years that I have been here, almost 12, and had never met. And I brought up with the city manager, and it had to go through a process, and what had to be voted on by the cancel and bring it back under a new name. So I guess I'm all right with it. When I think it was the warning.
Okay, staff matters. Jeanette, you gonna have anything?
Nope.
No? Committee member matters. Next thing we need to do is set the date for our next meeting and what we're gonna cover. Would you all like to do, like, let's just do 2 articles, do 3 and 4 for the next meeting? Okay, so we'll do 3 and 4 for the next meeting. Also, I think we have a calendar here for whatever meeting dates are available for next time. I don't have any.
Looks like they have the week of the 7th is early voting, so the chamber will be in use. So it'll get the 14th, 21st, or 28th of those Mondays.
I'm good with the 14th.
I'm good with the 14th.
That works.
14th,
14th,
March 14th,
6 PM.
At 6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Perfect.
Mine says, that is the 14th.
Doesn't this calendar say that early voting is going to be happening
No, I
here?
think the early voting
What?
is this week.
Right, the 7th.
No, I think that's above,
It does, if the line goes,
above the line.
You sure?
Uh-huh.
I thought that would be an open.
it's,
Meaning this
Jeanette,
is,
do you have your
this
calendar?
week is taken by early voting.
Right, March, so we went to the 14th.
so what you're saying is,
March 14th is open?
no,
Yeah.
The 14th is open.
oh, the
Yeah.
14th, okay, so
14th
it's
is open, yes.
below,
By the
okay,
circles
I'm sorry. Okay, I got it. We're both confused, Louise.
Okay, 14th is open.
So we're reading below the numbers instead of above the numbers. Got it.
That's the way, that's the way she did.
All right, so now we've set the next meeting date and what's going to be on the agenda. Move to adjourn. We have a motion to adjourn. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all
Thank you.
for your time.